While preparing dinner for my wife's entire family, I stepped into the garage for more chairs and heard her brother say, "I still can't believe you married this loser." "Dad's right. You need to divorce him before you have kids and get stuck forever," she replied, "Already working on it. My lawyer says we can take half his business, too." I returned with the chairs and continued hosting with a perfect smile. 3 days later, my WhatsApp was flooded with 47 desperate messages begging me. Something about Alice had shifted the week leading up to our family dinner, and not in the usual everyday way, like when she's overwhelmed at work or frustrated that I've left my muddy boots in the hallway again. No, this felt off in a deeper, quieter way. She kept glancing at her phone when she thought I wasn't paying attention, closed her laptop tabs a beat too quickly whenever I walked past, and started taking calls behind closed doors. After 7 years together, you get a kind of sixth sense about these things, the way a seasoned builder can spot a crooked wall from across the room. Listen, I never pictured myself typing out something like this. I'm not the guy who spills his guts to strangers on the internet. But here I am, 3 a.m., sipping bourbon alone, my whole world upside down, trying to make sense of how everything unraveled in the span of 3 damn days. So yeah, you all are getting front row seats to my personal catastrophe. Name's James, 34, dropped out of community college and poured everything I had into building my own construction company from scratch. It started with just me, an old truck that barely ran, and a stubborn refusal to quit. Fast forward a decade, and I've got 5 full crews working jobs across the county. Not flashy, but it puts food on the table and then some. Alice, she's 32, has been my wife for the last 7 years. I supported her through every step of law school, tuition, rent, groceries, while I was busting my ass trying to get my business off the ground. Her family never really saw me as worthy. They're old school upper middle class. Her dad Elijah plays the stock market for a living. Her mom Emma flips high-end houses in suburban neighborhoods. And her brother Paul thinks his MBA makes him the second coming of Warren Buffett. I always got the sense they thought I wasn't enough. The subtle jabs about my little construction venture or not going back to school, yeah, those never stopped. But Alice always had my back. Or so I believed. Last Saturday was our annual spring dinner, a tradition Alice insisted on to show off our place to her picture-perfect family. I spent the whole morning cleaning the yard, power washing the deck, even helped her prep in the kitchen. The brisket I'd been dry aging all week needed to come out flawless. I'd been up since dawn getting the smoker ready. Alice seemed more tightly wound than usual, snapping over small stuff, but I figured it was just the usual pre-dinner tension. Her family showed up around 4, her parents, Paul and his wife, her younger sister Magnolia, who's still in grad school. The moment Emma stepped inside, she started critiquing the living room layout. Elijah followed up with one of his "how's business" questions, asked with that smug tone like he was waiting for me to admit I was failing. By 6, dinner was ready. I'd set out our best china, the ones from our wedding registry we only ever used for this exact night, but noticed we were short 2 chairs. I headed out the side door toward the garage, but stopped when I heard voices around the corner by the garden. It was Alice and Paul standing near the azaleas, casually sharing a cigarette. Strange, since she supposedly quit 3 years ago. I was just about to call out when I heard my name. I froze. Paul was saying something like he still couldn't believe she married that guy, and that their dad had been right all along. She needed to get out before having kids, before she got stuck with me for good. Then Alice said something that shattered me from the inside out. She said she was already in the process, and her lawyer was confident she could take half of my business too. They laughed, like I was some clueless fool. They went on, talking about some guy named Dominic, how he was everything I wasn't, how she'd wasted her prime years playing house with a man in a hard hat. You ever experience a moment so jarring it feels like the ground underneath you just disappears? 7 years of marriage, gone. All those nights I stayed up helping her memorize case law, the road trips we never took so she could afford another semester, the extra shifts I picked up just to help pay off her loans. It all suddenly felt like a setup. But I didn't say a word, didn't scream, didn't confront. Something inside me turned to steel. I backed away quietly, grabbed the folding chairs from the garage, took 3 slow breaths, and walked back in with the fakest damn smile I've ever worn. Caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked normal, like any other guy hosting a dinner party. But inside, everything was burning. The rest of the night was a blur. I served wine, sliced the brisket, chuckled at Elijah's dry dad jokes, and watched my wife, this stranger I no longer recognized, act like nothing was wrong. I stared at her face, searching for some trace of the woman I married. Had she always looked at me like that, with veiled resentment, and I just never noticed? At one point, Emma actually asked for my brisket recipe, after all these years of brushing off everything I ever cooked or fixed. I explained the dry aging process with cold, detached precision, all while my brain was screaming. I caught Magnolia watching me closely. She's always been the only one in that family who seemed to see me as a real person. I wonder if she suspected anything. After dessert, Paul raised a glass and toasted, "Family and the changes to come," giving Alice a look that made my blood boil. I lifted my glass, smiled, and imagined shattering it right into his smug little smirk. They finally left around 11. Alice started cleaning up, humming to herself like she hadn't just torn our world to shreds. I told her I'd handle the rest, that she should get some sleep. She kissed my cheek and told me I was such a good husband. The sheer audacity nearly made me vomit. After she went to bed, I checked her laptop, password protected. That was new, but I knew her patterns. By the third try, I was in. Emails to her lawyer went back 3 months. The plan was to ride out our marriage until she secured a partnership at her firm, using my income and the image of stability, then cut the cord. She had spreadsheets outlining my business assets, detailed breakdowns of our finances, and a calculated timeline for the divorce. There were also transfers, small amounts, spaced out just under the threshold that would trigger alerts. She'd been building a separate account for months. Smart, lawyer smart. I checked our joint savings. $20,000 gone. The money I'd been saving to expand the business. Our future. And then I found the messages. Someone saved as D. Apparently, Dominic wasn't just the better fit. He was already test driving my replacement. 6 months worth of messages. 6 goddamn months. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Monday came, and for the first time in 3 years, I called in sick. I didn't go to the office. Instead, while Alice was at hers, I sat across from a divorce lawyer named Mike, someone a friend had recommended. I laid it all out, every screenshot, every detail. Mike didn't sugarcoat it. He told me flat out that, under state law, Alice might be entitled to half the value of my company, even though she'd never once contributed a thing to it. Even though I built it from the ground up while she was still grinding through school, and I supported her every step of the way. When he told me how much I stood to lose, the blood drained from my face. Years of sweat, sacrifice, sleepless nights, potentially sliced in half and handed to the woman who was secretly preparing to gut me. I remember looking at Mike and asking, "So that's it? I just bend over and take it?" He started talking about reaching a peaceful settlement, minimizing losses, but I was already somewhere else in my mind. Something in me had broken loose. That night, Alice came home with a container of chicken noodle soup, a concerned look on her face, and asked if I was feeling any better. I played the role, said I was probably coming down with something, just worn out. She suggested I see a doctor. Her whole act was flawless, Oscar-worthy. I nodded along, thanked her for the care, told her I loved her. She said it back with zero hesitation, like it cost her nothing. Like she wasn't plotting behind my back. I watched her scroll Instagram while we sat on the couch, saw her like an old picture of us that her sister had reposted from last Christmas. The caption? Couple goals. I nearly lost it. Sitting next to her felt like sitting beside a stranger wearing my wife's skin. Every movement, every word she spoke felt rehearsed. Had she always been this person? Had I been so blind for all these years, or did something inside her change? Honestly, I don't know. And maybe it doesn't even matter anymore. Because here's the truth. I've never been the kind of guy to seek revenge. When a contractor screws me over, I cut ties and move on. When a client's late on payment, I work it out. But this isn't business. This is my damn life. That second night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about Dominic and my bank account. And something inside me turned cold, sharpened, a focus I hadn't felt before. Alice and her family always assumed I was a nobody, just a guy with calloused hands and no college degree. They never saw the strategy behind the grind, the brain behind the blue collar. What they didn't realize is that building something from nothing takes more than muscle. It takes smarts, vision, and a stubborn kind of patience. The next morning, I made my first set of calls to my bank, then to my business partner, then to a few longtime clients I trusted. By lunchtime, the bones of a plan were forming. By dinner, I knew exactly what my next steps would be. Alice wanted a war? Fine. But she'd better be ready because she's walking into a chainsaw fight with a butter knife. This isn't about money anymore. It's about sending a message. To her, to her family, to Dominic, or whatever the hell his name is. The man they mocked for 7 years is about to school them in consequences. And here I am, 3 days after that dinner, sketching the final draft of my demolition playbook. Like any solid construction job, it all starts with a solid foundation. Tomorrow, I flip the switch. Alice thinks she's got everything under control, but she has no clue what's coming for her. Neither does her family, or Dominic, whoever the fuck he is. I supported her dreams for 7 years. Now I get to watch hers crumble in real time. Update. First, thanks for all the support on my last post. Never expected that kind of response. For those asking if I've calmed down or if I'm thinking more clearly now. Nope, still pissed, still moving forward, just more strategically now. Look, when you build something with your hands, you learn that rushing just creates problems you'll have to fix later. Revenge is the same way. It needs a proper foundation. The meeting at the cafe was more than just revealing. It cracked something open inside me. Frank, my accountant, looked like he'd aged a decade in a week. The guy could barely keep his eyes open. Apparently, Alice had already reached out to him under the guise of helping me prepare for a potential investor pitch. She'd posed a few seemingly innocent questions about how businesses are valued and what documents are needed to show ownership. Wanting to be helpful, Frank had shared some surface-level info, but something about her tone had unsettled him enough to bring it up when we met. When I laid out the truth, he went pale as chalk. "James, there's something you need to see," he said, pulling out his tablet and opening up a string of financial reports from the past 3 years. "These entries here," he tapped the screen. "Something's off." That's when it all started making sense. Alice hadn't just been planning a split. She'd been orchestrating a financial illusion, one meant to paint me as negligent with our company's funds. Shady discrepancies in transfer dates, funds moved during odd hours, invoices that didn't line up sequentially. Nothing overtly illegal, she knew better, but just enough to throw mud on the waters in court. Enough to get a forensic accountant brought in, someone who'd dig through everything, cost me tens of thousands and find absolutely no wrongdoing, but still draw out the divorce process for months. So Frank and I buckled down. We spent 3 intense hours retracing every transaction, building a clear paper trail proving the legitimacy of all business activity. We pushed up payments to vendors, cleared outstanding equipment loans, and meticulously documented Alice's total absence from anything operational. Midway through our work, I got a message. It was from Magnolia, Alice's sister. Now that caught me off guard. We've always been polite, maybe even warm, but we've never had a reason to text each other directly. She asked if I had time for coffee soon, said there was something she really needed to talk about. I told her Saturday morning would work, my mind racing with possibilities. But I still had another loose thread to pull. Something Alice's brother had said over dinner had been stuck in my head. Some vague comment about their parents stepping in when the time came. It felt off. And in construction, gut instincts can save your skin. So I went to the bank, sat down with our financial advisor, and laid it all out. Turns out my instincts were dead on. Alice had applied for a home equity line of credit 2 weeks ago, on our house. The one mostly under my name since I'd used my premarital savings for the down payment. The house I'd personally remodeled, adding close to $100,000 in sweat equity. Technically, I was still required to co-sign, but the paperwork was already sliding through the system. In another week, she'd have had access to nearly $200,000, money I'd be legally on the hook for. The advisor looked visibly uneasy when I explained I had no knowledge of the application. After I presented my ID and our marriage certificate, I was able to shut it down. Then I moved half of the funds in our shared account into my personal one, the exact amount I'd originally contributed. Is that petty? Maybe. But compared to what she was trying to pull, it's a fraction. When I got back home, I did something I'm not exactly proud of, but sometimes survival doesn't leave room for virtue. I installed discrete recording devices in our living room and bedroom. Totally legal in our state since it's my residence too, but yeah, morally murky. I also set up a small camera in our home office, angled right at her desk. After that, I leashed up the dog, strolled through the neighborhood, smiled, and waved like everything was normal. Played fetch with the Jenkins kid, scooped poop with one of those biodegradable bags, all while calmly plotting the destruction of my marriage. Just another Tuesday. That night at dinner, Alice seemed scattered, her eyes flitting to her phone more than her plate. When I asked about her day, she gave me vague, non-committal replies. Then her phone lit up again, and I caught a glimpse of the name flashing across the screen. Dominic. Who's Dominic? I asked, keeping my tone light as I reached for another helping of pasta. Her fork froze midair for a second. Oh, a new client from the firm. Urgent case. She quickly flipped her phone face down on the table. That slight hesitation told me more than her words ever could. After 7 years with someone, you notice the micro pauses. Must be pretty important if he's texting you at dinner, I added, still wearing the mask of the chill husband. She gave me this tight little smile. You know how it is. Some people don't understand personal boundaries. The irony nearly made me choke on my garlic bread. After the meal, she claimed she had to finish some work and slipped off to the home office. I cleaned the kitchen, purposefully clanging a few dishes so she'd think I was preoccupied, then crept to the hallway outside her office door, which she'd left slightly ajar. I could hear her voice. Low, intimate. Not the voice she used for clients. Not even the one she used with family. This was the voice reserved for whispered pillow talk. You can't just call me anytime you want. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. Just hold on. Yes, I miss you too. Every word felt like another dagger in the back of whatever was left of us. Rage surged, hot and heavy, and I had to fight the urge to storm in and blow the whole thing sky high. But that would have ruined everything. So instead, I turned and walked away. Back to the kitchen, turned on the tap, and pretended to wash more dishes while planning my next moves. Here's the thing about building. Timing matters. Pour concrete too soon after the rain. It won't set right. Rush the framing. The whole structure is compromised. This revenge needed time to cure properly. Wednesday morning, I accidentally left divorce papers I'd printed out visible on my nightstand. They were just the usual county forms, untouched, unfilled, still blank like they always were. But when I stepped out of the shower, they'd shifted ever so slightly on the counter. She must have looked through them, didn't say a word. Neither did I. Back at work, I started laying the groundwork, carefully and silently. I made a few discreet calls to clients I'd done favors for over the years, not for cash, but for insight. It didn't take long before I uncovered something that shook me. Dominic wasn't just a guy from nowhere. Turns out Dominic was tight with Paul, Alice's brother. They went to college together, same frat, same privileged circles. He came from old money too, the kind that mingled well with hers, the kind her parents had always hoped she'd end up with. And here's where the timeline started to twist. Dominic had shown up at nearly every family gathering I'd skipped in the past few years. Birthday dinners, a ski weekend, even a damn Caribbean cruise I had to miss to wrap up a massive project. The same project that eventually launched my company into the black. Through someone we both knew, I found out Dominic and Alice had a thing back in college. Nothing serious, short-lived, but now it looked like that old flame had never truly gone cold. This wasn't just some affair. This was long, calculated, and cold. As I uncovered more, I opened a spreadsheet and began tracking every cent I'd spent helping Alice chase her dreams. Every tuition payment, every textbook, rent, the new MacBook I gifted her at graduation, her bar exam course, her interview outfits, even the endless Uber rides I insisted she take instead of waiting alone for a train late at night. The number stunned even me. $143,622. And that didn't even count the lost gains if I'd put that money into my company instead. That night, for the first time in what felt like forever, Alice initiated sex. I nearly laughed right then. What timing? Was this all part of the game? One last performance to keep me emotionally sedated while she laid out the blueprints for my financial execution? I played my role. I did what was expected. But all I felt was distance. Disconnected, hollow, like I was watching someone else move through the motions. After she drifted off to sleep, I sat up in the dark, eyes locked on the slow spinning fan overhead, tracking its rotations instead of counting sheep. One question kept cycling through my head. Had our entire marriage been a carefully dressed lie? Had she always seen me as a placeholder? just a stepping stone to her real life? Thursday morning came, and I met up with Magnolia for coffee. She's always been different from the rest of the family, less polished, more sincere. I got there early, scrolled through Reddit to pass the time, still stunned at the outpouring of support from strangers online. Some folks suggested stuff I'd never dream of doing. Others shared stories eerily similar to mine, some worse. The solidarity, oddly enough, helped me breathe. Magnolia showed up looking uneasy, like she'd been carrying something heavy for too long. She ordered a fancy latte, picked at a blueberry muffin, and made awkward small talk until she couldn't anymore. Then, after a long pause, she took a breath and dropped the truth that locked everything in place. She'd known about Dominic and Alice for months. She'd seen them together at the family's lake house that weekend I'd skipped because of a work emergency. When she confronted Alice, her sister had sworn it was a one-time mistake, but it wasn't. Recently, after too many glasses of wine at another family dinner I couldn't make, Alice spilled the whole truth to Magnolia. The plan was always to stay with me until she made partner, then jump ship to Dominic, taking half of what I'd built with her as her golden parachute. Magnolia said she couldn't keep quiet anymore. She told me she'd always liked me, thought I was good for her sister, never understood why the rest of the family kept me at arm's length. I thanked her, careful not to reveal how much I already knew. Asked her to keep our conversation just between us. She agreed, looking like she'd finally let go of a weight she'd been carrying for far too long. As she got up to leave, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm sorry." It was the first time in days I felt something real. Thursday night, I set the next phase in motion. I faked a business emergency and called Alice, saying I needed everyone on deck for a critical crisis meeting the next night. Said a major client was threatening to walk, the company was in danger, and I needed her and her family's advice and presence. She hesitated, said she already had plans. I pushed harder, let a little fear crack in my voice, told her I was scared of losing everything we'd built together. I knew her guilt would do the rest. She caved. She agreed to host an emergency family dinner on Friday night. Said she'd get her parents and Paul on board. Perfect. Friday morning, I fine-tuned the setup. Placed printouts in a folder under my seat at the table. Loaded every piece of evidence, screenshots, voice recordings, receipts, onto my tablet. Even stopped by her favorite bakery across town to pick up that lemon tart she loved. Back at the office, I made sure everything was squared away. Had a real heart-to-heart with my business partner. He was stunned, but stood by me. We'd been through everything together since high school. He'd seen firsthand what funding Alice's rise had cost me, not just in dollars. When I walked through the door that evening, Alice was already home, setting the table with our nice china again. It felt symbolic. Another family dinner, same dining room, but a whole new script waiting to play out. She looked on edge, checking her phone every few minutes. I asked if everyone had confirmed, and she nodded absently. Said her folks were bringing wine. Paul and his wife were coming too. I suggested we invite Magnolia. Alice blinked in surprise, then shrugged and sent the text. The whole cast was in place. Perfect. As I headed upstairs to shower and change, Alice called after me, asking what the client issue was specifically so she could prepare her thoughts. I told her I'd lay it all out during dinner, one shot, no repeats, with everyone in the same room. As hot water poured over my back, I ran through it all again. The exact words, the sequence of proof, the timing of each revelation for maximum punch. It was surreal, like prepping for a pitch meeting where the client just happens to be your cheating wife and her co-conspirators. I put on the outfit Alice always said made me look sharpest. Dark denim, a crisp navy shirt, leather shoes instead of my usual boots. It felt like slipping into costume for my final scene as the loving, clueless husband. Downstairs, I could hear her murmuring on the phone, her tone low and urgent. The recorder hidden in the living room would catch every word, but I didn't need to play it back to know who she was whispering to or what lies she was feeding him. Let her have her illusion for a few more minutes. Let her soothe Dominic with her fake confidence. Let her bask in the fantasy that she's orchestrating this whole night. The doorbell rang. Alice startled and ended the call in a hurry. Her parents were the first to arrive, her father handing over a bottle of ridiculously overpriced Cabernet, just as promised. He gripped my hand with that same smug pressure, already fishing for details about this so-called business emergency, practically gloating. Paul came next with his wife in tow, and not long after, Magnolia stepped in, eyes darting everywhere but mine. Everyone was in place. The whole cast gathered for the finale. As we drifted toward the dining room, Alice touched my arm gently, asking if I was okay. The concern in her voice was so convincingly tender that for a breathless second, I almost questioned it all. Wondered if I'd spun a web out of paranoia and half-truths. But then her phone buzzed in her pocket, and I caught Dominic's name glowing on the screen before she silenced it. Just like that, the last flicker of doubt disappeared. I took my seat at the head of the table, my folder of evidence resting calmly beside my plate. Alice slid into the chair to my right. Her father claimed the spot on my left. The symmetry was poetic, almost identical to the dinner where I first sensed her betrayal. Only now, I was the one holding the cards. As her mother pondered over wine choices, I caught Magnolia glancing at me with a strange mix of curiosity and dread. She didn't know what was about to happen, but she could sense it. I rose, wine glass in hand. The table hushed instantly, every eye on me, waiting for the promised explanation. I looked at each of them slowly, saving Alice for last. Before we get to why I brought you all here, I said, lifting the glass slightly, I want to make a quick toast. To family, to loyalty, and to finally seeing things for what they are. The puzzled looks around the table were just the beginning. They didn't know the storm that was coming. Neither did Alice. Final update. I've been staring at my phone for the last hour, watching the message counter climb. 47 texts from Alice in just under 3 days, each one more desperate than the last. Look, I promised to tell you what happened at that dinner, and it was wild. I just raised my glass in that toast to family, loyalty, and finally seeing things clearly. The confusion on everyone's faces was priceless. I sat down calmly and took a sip of Elijah's expensive wine. So, about this business emergency I mentioned, Alice squeezed my hand encouragingly. The absolute performance of it, I almost had to admire her commitment. Well, I continued pulling out my tablet. I've discovered some serious problems that threaten everything I've built. Problems developing right under my nose. Elijah leaned forward with barely contained smugness. Financial issues? Cash flow problems? I've always said your business model seemed precarious. Actually, I said, connecting my tablet to our TV, the problem isn't with my business, it's with my marriage. The room went silent. Alice's hand froze on mine. James, she whispered, what are you doing? Here's the thing. When you're demolishing a structure, you don't start with the roof. You undermine the foundation first. So I played the recording of Alice and Paul from the previous dinner, their voices filling the room. Paul saying she needed to divorce me before having kids and getting stuck forever. Alice replying she was already working on it, and her lawyer said they could take half my business too. I watched each face around the table. Paul went pale. Alice's mother covered her mouth. Elijah's jaw clenched. Magnolia closed her eyes like she was watching a car crash she'd known was coming. And Alice just sat there, paralyzed, as her carefully constructed plan imploded. Next, I showed screenshots of her texts with Dominic, carefully edited but still damning. 6 months. I said it softly, almost to myself. 6 months you've been sneaking around with him while I was clocking in 60-hour work weeks just to keep us afloat. I turned to face her parents, the room tense with unspoken truths. Did you know your daughter was cheating? Or were you just aware that she was preparing to leave me? Elijah started to cut in, but I didn't give him the chance. Instead, I turned my phone around and opened up a spreadsheet, each line a reminder of my sacrifice. $143,622. That's what I poured into her education, while building my business from the ground up with nothing but a worn-out truck and a toolbox. Then came the next slide. A hidden bank account in her name, the withdrawal requests, the denied home equity loan. And this, I said, is how she planned to repay me. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of everything left unsaid. Then chaos erupted. Elijah pushed back his chair with a screech and stood. This is absurd. Alice, we're leaving. But before she could follow, she reached out and grabbed my arm. James, please. I can explain, she pleaded, voice trembling. Meanwhile, Paul, the coward, was quietly trying to erase messages under the table. I pointed straight at him. Go ahead, delete them. I already have the backups, all the times you helped her plan this out. Paul froze. His eyes darted to his wife, who stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Alice shifted gears fast, her voice now cracking, tears starting to fall. It wasn't like that, she insisted. I was confused. I wasn't happy. We've been drifting apart for years. Mom, my laugh was hollow. Drifting apart? While I was paying off your student loans? While I was working overtime so we could have a future? I hadn't planned to lose my temper, but something inside me cracked open. I leaned in, voice low. 7 years. 7 years I believed in us. And all this time I was just your stepping stone. Her father finally stepped in, voice stern and dismissive. Whatever issues you two have, they're between you. But if you think ambushing my daughter like this is going to intimidate us, you're wrong. We have resources you can't begin to understand. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Resources? You mean like the $20,000 she siphoned from our joint account? Or the HELOC she tried to pull against my home? Elijah was still mid-rant when I noticed Alice texting someone under the table. That's when I dropped the final card. Did she happen to mention that Dominic's married too? I asked, casually as if commenting on the weather. The room froze. Even Elijah's tirade hit a brick wall. Found out yesterday. His wife's name is Rachel. Lovely woman. Very understanding once I showed her the messages between him and Alice. Alice's face turned the color of ash. You... what? She stammered. We had coffee yesterday, I said. Figured she deserved to know the truth. That's when Elijah snapped. He grabbed the edge of the handcrafted oak dining table, the one I'd built myself, and flipped it. Plates, wine glasses, food, all crashed to the floor in a splatter of chaos. Alice screamed. Her mother gasped. Paul leapt back like the coward he was. I just sat there, oddly calm, watching 7 years of illusion shatter before my eyes. Magnolia was the only one who moved to pick up the mess. Our eyes met. She gave me a small nod. I couldn't tell if it was respect or sympathy. Maybe both. Elijah jabbed a finger at me, his whole body shaking with rage. You think you've won? You're nothing. You build things with your hands because you weren't smart enough for college. My daughter made a mistake slumming with you and we're going to fix it. I stood, slow and deliberate. Yeah, I work with my hands, Elijah. But at least I've built something real. What have you built? Other than a family of liars? He lunged at me, actually tried to swing. Paul barely managed to hold him back as he spewed threats about legal teams and lawsuits. Alice was crying now, repeating the same plea. James, please, let's talk. Just you and me. This isn't how you wanted it to end. She wanted to divorce me. She wanted to take half of everything I built while sleeping with someone else. I just shook my head. There's nothing left to talk about. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. I think it's time you all left. Paul pulled his father out first. Magnolia lingered in the doorway. I'm sorry, she said softly. You always deserved better. Then she was gone, and it was just Alice and me, standing in the wreckage of what used to be our home. Where are you going to go? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. I already booked a hotel, I replied. I'll be back for my things tomorrow while you're at work. Her eyes widened. You planned all this, she breathed. I grabbed my bag, the one I packed 2 nights ago, and slung it over my shoulder. I learned from the best, I said, walking out the door. Behind me, her voice cracked. You'll regret this. My father wasn't bluffing about the lawyers. I didn't answer. Some foundations are too damaged to rebuild on. That night at the hotel, I slept better than I had in months. The next day I went back while Alice was at work, packed what mattered, clothes, tools, family photos, my dog's stuff, and left my key on the counter. I'd already rented a small apartment near my workshop, not hiding, just creating space. Called my employees and explained I'd be working remotely, dealing with personal matters. For 2 days, I stayed off social media, ignored emails, focused on setting up my new place. The dog adjusted quickly. Animals can always tell when the air in a home shifts, when something's broken beyond repair. On the 3rd morning, I finally turned my phone back on, the silence of the past few days cracking open. It lit up instantly. 47 messages from Alice on WhatsApp, cycling between outrage and desperation. The first few screamed in capital letters, "How dare you do this to me?" and "You've destroyed everything." But then the fury softened. "James, please, call me. We need to talk. I know I messed up, but we can work through it." By the 30th message, she was bargaining, clinging to scraps. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off my family. Just don't shut me out. Message 45 landed simply, I'm sorry. The last two came in at 3:14 a.m. I told Dominic everything, the money, the divorce. He said we should still be together. Then the follow-up. He just called, said he's ending things, trying to fix things with Rachel. I have nobody now. I read them all in silence. No anger, no triumph, just a quiet numbness. The kind that settles in after you've finished a hard job and know no one's ever going to thank you for it. As I kept scrolling, another message pinged in. James, I know you've seen these. Just tell me what you want. Money? The house? I'll sign anything. Even now, she didn't understand. It was never about any of that. It was about betrayal. About years spent living in a lie. A stolen future. I finally replied, the divorce papers are already at your office. I just want this over with. Her reply was immediate. Can we meet, please? Just to talk? Before I had the chance to answer, my phone rang. Mike, my attorney. Rachel, Dominic's wife, had contacted him. After I'd shown her everything, she'd started digging herself, and what she found matched up. Dominic had a history, a pattern of lies and manipulation with other women. She wanted to compare notes, fuel for both our divorces. As Mike laid out the details, I looked around the bare apartment I now called home. Just a mattress on the hardwood floor, half-open boxes, and my dog watching me, calm and steady. This wasn't the life I imagined at 34, starting from scratch. Again. But sometimes, you have to strip a house to the studs before you rebuild it right. I agreed to meet Rachel for coffee. Not because of some romantic spark, but because there's comfort in being understood by someone who knows exactly how betrayal tastes. After the call, I sent Alice one final message. There's nothing left to say. The marriage is over. Please direct all future communication through our lawyers. And with that, I blocked her number. That afternoon, I took the dog on a hike. Midway up the trail, a message came through. Magnolia. Heard you moved out. Alice is with our parents now. Dad's furious, but Mom's starting to ask real questions. That perfect daughter mask? It's cracking. I texted back, thanks for telling me. Hope you're holding up okay. Her response, I am. More than okay, actually. I told them I'm dropping out of the program they forced on me. Finally going after what I want. I think your courage rubbed off. As the sun dipped behind the hills, I watched my dog roam ahead, tail swaying with joy. 7 years lost. Countless sacrifices. A future built on lies, now gone. But in its place, freedom. Truth. A shot at building something real. My phone buzzed again. Rachel confirming our coffee and sending me a link to a support group for people burned by financial deception in marriage. Turns out this kind of story isn't so rare after all. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and called my dog over. Time to head home, make dinner, maybe unpack another box. Small steps, one day at a time. Like any good building project, the foundation comes first. And this time, I'm making damn sure it's solid.